You're kind of trying to make an interesting comparison between what we're talking about here today, between the Apollo 11 and Woodstock, and what do they say about our culture and our temperament and who we are as a people. How has the Apollo 11 landing affected America 50 years later? How has Woodstock affected America 50 years later? I'm arguing, and I don't know that you're disagreeing with me, I'm arguing that Woodstock had a lot more of an effect and impact on who we are as a people today than the Apollo 11.
For sure.
I mean, we celebrated the Apollo 11, and consequentially, we're the first people to put a man on the moon. I mean, that'll never change.
There's a lot of technological advancements that came out of the
Tang and
research,
styrofoam and all kind of, wonderful stuff.
Velcro.
I think the Velcro. I think the packing bubbles came as a result of some trips we've taken in outer space.
But culturally.
But you were trying to play it into the Donald Trump phenomenon.
Yeah, and I don't quite know where I'm going with this, but I was trying to, well, earlier I tried to put it in a political perspective, okay, the Woodstock versus the moon landing. But now I'm trying to figure out how you might tie that political perspective into Make America Great Again.
Well, here's what I think. I think that the people who would rather Trump not be president and have never shown up on the scene are trying to make you as a Trump supporter believe that the only reason you voted for Donald Trump is you're a white guy and you like the days when the white guy had all the influence, control, and power. That's their game. That's their scheme. That's their shtick. That's what they're trying to do. That you as a white guy, you know the only reason you voted for Donald Trump because you don't want African Americans to have equal opportunity. And you don't want Hispanics to be, you don't want the American dream to be accessible to anybody but white people like you. That's the guilty theory. That's the way they're trying to argue. The media does it every single day. We've had, fanatical Islamic terrorism for the last 20 years in this country, and we've covered it, but we've not covered it with the intensity of when a white supremacist, shoots up a mosque. They're all horrible. They're all horrific. They're all tragedy. Any loss of life, innocent life in particular, is a human tragedy. One's no less than the other, whether you're a Muslim, a Christian, a Jewish person, whatever. I mean, loss of life in the most innocent and horrific way is, it's sad. It's sad, but it's still, they're trying to make you believe that when you say things like, man, really, Woodstock changed our country, and we've got all this moral inversion and all this permissiveness that is allowed. They want you to believe that the only reason that bothers you is because you're afraid it eventually changes the country where you don't have that distinct advantage, you white guy, you. That's the intent. I mean, and it's methodical, it's incremental.
I see it every day.
It's designed, and I'll be honest,
the news.
It works a lot. I mean, it has worked a lot because people will guilt themselves into believing, did I really vote for Trump because I want to make America great again, or did I vote for Trump because I want to make America the way it was when I had an upper hand? And that's what everybody's trying to convince every Trump supporter that they did. What I believe is that a lot of people wanted somebody to stand up against this moral inversion. And look, Rev, I heard the mayor of South Bend, Indiana. He's a presidential candidate. I mispronounced his name. He's got a weird name. He's a homosexual male. He's an interesting political figure. I think Thigpen and I talked a little bit about him Friday. He could be an interesting candidate. But he said something very curious to Chuck Todd. I think Chris Matthews. He's talking to Chris Matthews on Fox News. And he said this, and it's the first Democrat I've heard say this. He said, I don't think anybody that voted for Donald Trump were under any moral illusion. I think the Trump voter knew exactly what they were voting for. They knew they weren't voting for a scout leader or a Sunday school teacher. And I think until we accept that reality, it's almost like he's the only Democrat that is willing to concede the fact that the Trump voter knew what he was doing. He's not some moron from the Rust Belt who was hoodwinked into believing, if you'll vote for me, I can make America white again. And I can make America, more advantaged to one class of people. See, this guy's a little bit different than that. Now he does say this, and it's interesting, because I listened to his entire interview, and he says, I don't believe the Trump voter was under any illusion of who they were voting for and the frailty of the man, the flawed character of the man. I believe, I'm speaking as him, I believe that the voter understood completely exactly what they were doing. But I don't believe they understood how difficult it was going to be to bring back manufacturing jobs, to recreate an economy that worked for a group of people for a generation or two. And maybe they understood who they were voting for, but I don't think they understood nor properly accounted for the realities that would face that significant challenge of trying to bring jobs back, trying to bring manufacturing back, trying to create or recreate the vibrancy of the American middle class in places that have been decimated by the hollowing of the deindustrialization would have been largely to blame for the reason those places are shadows of their former selves, and they voted for Donald Trump. But I just, and Rev, I've thought a lot about this, and I was going to do this tomorrow and jumping the gun a little bit. I just believe that when you look at the academic scandal, because we're talking about 35,000 macros. I mean, we're not talking about, I mean, we're flying, we're not over the ground looking at the macros. We're 35,000 feet in the air. We may be 70,000 feet in the air, and we're looking at the macros when I'm talking about Woodstock, and I'm talking about the Apollo 11, and we're talking about things like Brexit, and we're talking about Trump. I believe that we're in the throes, and I'm serious about this, and I don't know where we go from here, but I think that there is a realization by the elites in America that we believe and we know that they've failed all over the world. I think Brexit. I mean, David Cameron basically said, let the people choose. And when the people chose, he said they're fruitcakes and they're loonies and they don't know their butt from third base. Well, again, the American election, let the people choose. And we chose not. And I think the great debate that we're having today, and we're not really having it because nobody knows how it's to be constructed, is how do we throw the elites out? How do we purge ourselves of these self-appointed masters of the universe who told us how amazing everything would be if we'd only trust them? I think that's bigger than Apollo 11. I think that's bigger than Woodstock, and I think Brexit represents that, because I've read a lot over the weekend about Brexit and Theresa May's quandary and where she is. And I think people are beginning to realize that the entire global economy is rigged against them. And if you're not uber wealthy, if you're not elite, if you're not in the clique, then you believe the system is rigged against the average citizen. And I think it goes from one end of the spectrum to the other. I think Brexit is a part of that. I mean, 3 years after voting on a 16-word referendum, politicians are still not willing to carry out the will of the people. I want to say that again, because I think that's, just think of this. Think of the arrogance that a group of elites in Britain have, in England, when 3 years ago, there was a 16-word referendum proposed basically saying, do you want to stay in the European Union or not? And about 18 million Englishmen and women said, no, I want out. 3 years later, the political establishment is still trying to figure out a way to hold on and hang on. And I think that just shows you that the system is rigged against average citizens all over the world. And I think I think we're the dawning of that realization that this system that has been concocted and cooked up by a bunch of people who are in the know, in the clique, understand how that world works. They've advantaged themselves. I keep saying it. They've fed at the trough of government all over the world. And the American people have finally realized how stupid they were to continue that to be allowed. You know what we don't know? We don't know what to do about it. We voted for Trump. They voted for Brexit. There have been governments all over the world who've done similar things, but the establishment is really kind of digging in. I mean, think of this, Rev. I mean, we're 3 years, and the English Parliament will not honor the will of the people. That's unbelievable to me until you think about Donald Trump. We're 3 years into the Trump administration, and the people who don't want Trump there are trying to do everything they can to make him an illegitimate president.
They're still at it.
It's the most. They're eerily similar. You've got a group of people in England who are saying, no, we can't let the people run this country. We run this country. We're the elites. We're smarter than everybody else. We're more connected than everybody else. We're wealthier than everybody else. And our very livelihoods depend on this world working a certain way. So we can't let it change. We can't let England get out of the European Union, because my world turns upside down if that happens. And I think we're beginning, and here's why I think we're at base camp 1 of climbing Mount Everest. Because I think we're at the beginning of discovery.
That's a very interesting analogy.
I just think the people around the world are beginning to understand that the status quo is full of themselves, and they're nowhere near as smart as we thought they were. They're nowhere near as capable as we thought they were. And the only reason that Brexit will not be honored, because think about it, the Parliament is a duly elected group of people representing the interest of who? The people. And the people clearly said what they wanted. And for 3 years, the politicians have fought against the will of the people. And you can say, well, that's Britain. It would never happen here. Of course it's happening here. For 3 years, our federal government has worked against the will of the people. The media is complicit. The status quo is complicit. The elites are complicit. The establishment, the deep state, all these organized forces, the lobbyists, the consultants, the people who feed at the trough of government. That's who doesn't like Donald Trump. That's who doesn't like Brexit in Great Britain. And I think it's becoming obvious to the majority of people in Britain, in America, in Italy, in Spain, in Venezuela, in places all around the world. France. The system is rigged. Correct, France. The system is rigged against the average citizen. And that's base camp 1. We've established that. Brexit is proof of that. Donald Trump getting elected president is proof of that. There is no debate there anymore. We know the system is rigged against the average person. We know around the world the status quo has empowered themselves in the most self-gratifying way imaginable that they're the ones that need to be in charge. And all of a sudden we've realized, no, they're not the ones that need to be in charge. In fact, I find them so offensive that I'm willing to vote for a real estate developer with orange hair. And I'm willing in England, Rev, guess what I'm willing to do? I'm willing to just say to hell with it. Let's get out of the European Union. And that's what we've done, but think of what the establishment has done. Instead of saying, okay, it's our job, it's our obligation to honor the will of the people. That's what we're here for. May not like it, but that's the way the world works. The empowerment of the vote. The voters have spoken loudly and clearly, here's the guy they want to be our president. And what did we do? Or what did they do? What did the establishment do? What did the elites do? What did the status quo do? They tried to delegitimize him. They tried to disparage everything he's ever done because they believe that they are the ones that should get to make the rules that we live under. The same thing with Brexit. Nearly 18 million people in England said, I want out, and I want out right now. I want the sovereignty of my country back. I want the culture of my country back. I want the identity of my country back. 3 years later, guess what's happening? A bunch of elite politicians are trying to do everything in their power to thwart the will of the voter. Now, what comes next? I have no idea. Is it a revolution? Is it ugly and nasty and incoherent? No idea. I have no idea what comes next in England. And I'm using those as examples because I think the timeline of those are fairly similar to one another. And what do we do when they don't honor the will of the average voter? What do we do when they continue to try everything within their power to overthrow Donald Trump? Or when for 3 years they refuse to honor the will of the people in Britain? And Rev, they've tried to complicate this about, well, if we drop it in, they're telling people if we do what you want to do, you won't have any food by tomorrow. It's nonsense. And see, we know it's nonsense now. We just don't know what to do about the nonsense. And I think the next shoe to drop is what happens when they don't honor the will of the people. How frustrated do the people become? What are the people of England willing to do next? What are the people in America willing to do next? If every time you turn around, their duly elected president is being disparaged, or really and truly, I mean, there's been an attempt to overthrow an American president. And there's been a lot of people complicit. Some in his own party have been a part of it.